welcome to session 6 of Unit 5. And in this session, we'll be looking at the laboratory experience method of teaching. My name is Patrick Ejay. Now, by the end of this session, you should be able to explain the role a physics teacher or student plays in laboratory experiments and suggest why students are sometimes assigned to groups during laboratory experiments. So now let us look at organizing laboratory work. And we must understand that the effectiveness of the laboratory experience is related to the amount of the learner or the student participation. So how effective our laboratory experience method will depend on how well we also ensure active student participation. And when we say active student participation, then we mean the involvement of the learner in the experiment and letting the learner know his or her responsibilities during the experiment in order to help him to progress and to succeed during the experimental process. Now, in theory, or in the ideal situation, you realize that when it comes to arrangement of learners in the laboratory for practical work or experimental work, then it should be one student to one whole or one complete setup. So that is the ideal situation. One student must be in charge of one setup. And so in this way, when it comes to the planning, the initial planning, gathering of materials, preparation of apparatus, designing the method, data collection, results, analyzing the results, and drawing conclusions should be the work of the individual student, because the individual student does the work on his or her own. So we made mention that the ideal situation in the physics laboratory should be that one student should have access to a complete setup so that the data collection, the analyzing of results, drawing conclusions, designing experiments, all this will be done by the individual students. But in reality, there are some students who learn best when they are paired with their colleagues. They learn best when they are in small groups. And because in small groups, they share ideas among themselves and they feel comfortable asking their colleagues questions, they are able to understand concepts well. And in small groups too, once there is cooperation, once there is shared responsibility, then understand that the small group activity can also be beneficial. For instance, there are some learners that they feel very shy to talk in class. And so when they are working with their learners, you realize that they will try to put away the shyness. There are some students who sometimes even find it difficult to ask questions. But when they are paired with their colleagues, they now feel okay to ask their colleagues questions concerning the experiment that is being done. And there are even students who are extroverts, who always want to show that, yes, they can do it. You realize some such students will assume the role of leaders. They will be giving directives. Then you realize that there are some leadership qualities that if the individual was to work on his or her own, wouldn't have been developed. But once they are in groups, such qualities are developed. And so the science teacher or the physics teacher, you should be aware of these possibilities and plan your laboratory session accordingly. Plan your laboratory session in such a way that you pair students to work on various setups. You pair students based on their ability levels so that they can share ideas among themselves. And there should be the opportunity in the laboratory to provide experiences using both arrangements. That is, when you want the learner to work on their own, you must provide opportunities so that the learning that you want to happen can happen. And when you also pair them in groups, you must also provide the various opportunities that will help them or help you, the teacher, achieve the aim of the laboratory session. Now, when we try pairing our learners, we must try as much as possible to avoid stereotyping. We must try as much as possible to avoid some arrangements that are too rigid and the learners must go by those arrangements. We must make the arrangements flexible so that learners can approach their colleagues in order to maximize their learning. Now let's look at the use of laboratory assistants. And we must understand that preparations for laboratory work require exorbitant amounts of time on the part of the teacher. And for that reason, we will require the help of laboratory assistants. And their work will include ordering materials, providing for their storage, inventorying, repairing equipment, preparing for laboratory experiments daily. And you will see that all these are very time-consuming tasks that the teacher alone cannot be doing all the time. And so once the laboratory technician or assistant is there, then this person will help in doing all these activities. And some teachers have developed systems where students' laboratory assistants are used. So in schools where there are no laboratory assistants or lab technicians to be doing such jobs, then the teacher will develop a system where he will make use of students. So students will now serve as the laboratory assistants who will help in ordering materials, providing for their storage, repairing. There are some students who can be trained and they can help in this regard. And so once a teacher, you try to go by this method, then you should have a handbook for the laboratory assistants to help in the organization. Anytime you want to have a lab session or you want to use the laboratory experience method of teaching. So if you are using students, then there should be a handbook that will give them the guide on how to arrange or order the various materials in the lab. And because that is not their work, you must sometimes give such students credit for their participation. So let's look at the handbook for laboratory assistants. And each laboratory assistant should constantly be working to make the science department more successful. And we must understand that there are definite responsibilities, duties, and dangers that are involved in the program for assistants. And that is why they need a handbook that will provide them their responsibilities, that will provide them their duties, and also provide them the dangers involved in handling the laboratory. And we must also know that the Department of Science depends on the laboratory assistants to a great extent, because anytime there will be a laboratory session, they are the ones to ensure that the place is okay for the experiment to take place. And so it is expected that each assistant should be trusted. Each assistant can be someone who can be relied upon to perform duties properly without the necessity of close supervision. So once the responsibilities, once the duties of the laboratory assistant are being listed in the laboratory assistant's handbook, then the person should be able to perform his or her duties with or without supervision. So what are the responsibilities and duties of the laboratory assistant? And we saw earlier on that when it comes to conducting laboratory sessions, it requires a lot of time on the part of the teacher. And for that reason, there should be a laboratory assistant who will be helping the science or the physics teacher in conducting laboratory sessions. And so specifically, the responsibilities and duties of the laboratory assistant will include the following: the care and the organization of the stock room, the preparation of the laboratory exercises and demonstrations for teachers, the preparation of papers, information sheets, class lists, and other clerical work for the teachers. So every experiment has a set of instructions that will be given to the learners, and these instructions are normally prepared. The laboratory assistant must make sure that these information are available for use when the learners require them or the learners need them. And the inventorying of supplies. So he should help anytime new supplies come, take records of such supplies. And the collection of laboratory reports and other papers for teachers. So when students are done with their lab session and they write their report, he should make sure that he takes all the reports from the learners and keep them for the teacher. And also the preparation of charts, posters, signs, and labeling of shelves. So all all these are some of the duties that the laboratory assistant can perform to assist the teacher. Now, students, in this session, we look at the role of a physics teacher as well as the student when it comes to laboratory experiment. And as we bring the session to an end, why are students sometimes assigned to groups during laboratory experiments?